Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're about to start. Thank you so much for joining us. And here I will give the word to Paul Newell-Price, who is the coordinator of Super-G, and he will explain you more about this webinar, the project, and even himself. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Francesca. Good afternoon, everyone. As Francesca just said, I'm Paul Newell-Price. I'm a soil scientist at ADAS in the United Kingdom and scientific coordinator for the Horizon 2020 Super-G project on sustainable permanent grasslands, farming systems and policies. So welcome to this, which is the first webinar in a series of 3 webinars on permanent grassland in Europe. And the NATI strapline is policies, services and management. So we're talking about permanent grassland, and by that we mean any land that's dominated by grasses or herbs that can be grazed or mown and has not been part of an arable rotation for 5 years or more. So thank you for joining. We've got about 150 people registered. So good to see so much interest. Our focus today is on priorities and services. And we've got 3 speakers speaking for about 15 minutes each, and then that'll be followed by a Q&A session of about half an hour. So feel free to put your questions and comments in for the Q&A session. So we've got, as I say, 3 speakers. We've got Susana Gaona-Saez, who's from European Commission, Research Programme Officer. She'll be speaking on latest research priorities related to grassland within the agro-environment research innovation landscape. Then we've got René Schils from Wageningen Research, who is a project partner and leading the activities working on how permanent grassland delivers for a range of ecosystem services. And then our final speaker is Yiying Cao from ADAS. And she'll be speaking on attitudes and behaviours of EU grassland farmers and the message for policymakers. And she's leading on the farmer survey work in Super-G. So just a reminder that the session will be recorded, so hopefully it'll be available for people to view after today's webinar. For any questions or comments, please use the Q&A button at the bottom. I'm sure many of you will have been on a Zoom webinar before, so it won't be too alien to us. But yeah, please use that button for any questions, any general questions or questions to specific speakers or any comments that you'd like to make. The chat will be used by CONSULAI only, who are hosting this webinar, to provide any sort of technical guidance or any other information. So it's my great pleasure to introduce, first of all, Susanna. I will stop sharing my screen so Susanna can then start sharing her screen. So Susanna is Research Programme Officer at the European Commission, DG Agriculture and Rural Development Research and Innovation Unit, where she is responsible for the portfolio of ecological approaches. Before joining the European Commission in 2018, she worked for 10 years at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, holding various positions in Rome and in Brussels. Prior to that, she represented the main Spanish National Farmers Association in Brussels for 3 years. She started a professional career in Andalusia in Spain, supporting the regional government in the implementation of the CAP aid regime. She holds a master's degree in agricultural engineering from the universities of Cordoba and Ghent, and a master's in European Union studies from the University Libre de Brussels. So, Susanna, if you are able to share your screen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks very much for the introduction. I already shared my screen. I don't know if you can see it, if somebody can confirm.
Yes, we can see your screen, okay. Susanna, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for the confirmation. And thanks again to Paul very much for the invitation, and to the whole Super-G team. I think it's very nice that you have this initiative of organizing this series of webinars on this interesting aspect and subject that I think is quite pertinent, particularly at this right moment in time. So, okay, I don't need to introduce myself. I have already been introduced by Paul. So maybe to say that I am indeed working in DG Agriculture of the European Commission. I am in the unit for research and innovation. So we are really the unit responsible for programming the research and innovation activities that go into the research and innovation framework programs, Horizon 2020, and now Horizon Europe. So we are lucky to be in a so-called what we call policy DG, because we are very closely working alongside with the colleagues who are really working on the policies. So the colleagues dealing with the CAP and the negotiations with the member states and so many other policies. So this is, I think, an advantage. So I've been asked to talk to you a bit about the priorities related to grasslands. I understand under Horizon Europe, because it's the new program, as you know, that is has started already. I must confess at the start that I was hoping to be able to give you especially a lot of more details about the work program, the first work program of Horizon Europe, that, as you may know, covers from 2021 to 2022. And but unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a lot of details about that, about the topics and about the opportunities there, because as you may know, it hasn't been published yet. It is a bit delayed, the publication. I was hoping perhaps by this webinar it could be possible, but okay. In any case, I will be able to give you a little bit of an overview of where we could see possibilities for research on grasslands. So maybe to start, give you a little bit, because I think it makes sense to, before starting into the specificities of Horizon Europe, of course, you know that research and innovation is a clear, for us, the way we see it, is a clear enabler of policies. And in this case, notably, well, agricultural policies is really essential. And as you may know, you all know very well, we had the European Green Deal already published more than 1 year ago, or 1.5 years ago, with a very, very clear ambition for Europe to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So this is really a clear and very, very ambitious target to which all the sectors of activity, farming, but not only, all the other sectors will have to contribute. As you know, there are many initiatives and legislative proposals and a lot of policies that are emanating from the European Green Deal. Perhaps the most relevant for the farming sector are the Farm to Fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and the Climate Pact and the Climate Law. But I wouldn't say that we have to stop there, because actually there are many other policies, like on pollution and on circular economy, where the agricultural sector, and I also speak about the forestry sector, of course, is very important. So maybe let's concentrate maybe on these three at the beginning, and then we can see. So, well, as you know, the biodiversity strategy is really having an objective to really put Europe's biodiversity on the path to recovery by 2030. And there, as you may have seen in the text already published more than 1 year ago, there is quite a prominent role given to grasslands. So it recognizes that sustainably managing grasslands will be essential for the emission reduction and climate adaptation targets that we have under the Green Deals. It recognizes also the importance of grasslands as carbon-rich ecosystems that should be really protected. Then there are also other areas where I would also see the correlation with grasslands, notably the recognition of agroecology as a new, well, not new, but as a sustainable farming practice or approach that can help achieve the targets set by the Green Deal, and not only by the biodiversity and the Farm to Fork strategies. And there is recognition also of the role of permanent grasslands in this regard, and also in the context of the CAP strategic plans and the CAP negotiations, there is a recognition of the importance to take these things into consideration there. And then last but not least, also related, I think, is the fact that we have to reach, we have this important target for organic farming and organic aquaculture also, to reach by 2030 that at least 25% of agricultural land is under organic farming management. So this means also the uptake of agroecological practices should be significantly increased. So for the Farm to Fork, as you know, it has an ambition to set establish more sustainable food systems that have neutral or positive environmental impact on food production, but at the same time, they should ensure food security and public health, also preserve affordability of food, and ensure that these food systems are robust and resilient. So it's quite an ambition. And there you may have seen that there are some reference to grasslands. It's notably mentioned when it refers to the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from the agricultural sector. And also you may have seen also the initiative that is also launched somehow by the Farm to Fork strategy, which is the EU carbon farming initiative, that is also an important one if we want to move towards the climate neutrality objective that we have under the Green Deal. When it comes to the carbon farming, it's not under all these things are not under the remit of research and innovation, but I am explaining or giving a little bit of hint to that because we see, as I said at the beginning, we see research as an enabler of these initiatives and these targets. And the carbon farming is really conceived as a tool to reward farmers and foresters for all those climate positive practices that help reach this ambition of really reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that come from agriculture. And there are some examples that have been considered under this carbon farming initiative. One of them, as you can see in the list, one of them is also protecting carbon-rich soils such as grasslands and peatlands. The Commission has been working on a number of activities, undertaking workshops with stakeholders, and also recently you may have seen that they have, it's colleagues from DG Clima working on this, but also, of course, with DG Agri, but DG Clima is on the lead. They have had this publication of a handbook on carbon farming published already on the 27th of April. And there is also some indication about grassland. So I think it's interesting source of information also for you. Well, what I wanted to say that, of course, these initiatives and these policy documents all come with very ambitious targets. Some of them you can see on the slide. Some of them are quantified, others are not quantified, but are equally important. And it means that really, in order for all of us collectively to be able to achieve these targets by 2030, it means that we need to step up the efforts. We only have, 8-9 growing seasons to get there, so it's really the time is under pressure. But of course, we are not starting from scratch on these, and this is going to be a collective effort, not only of research and innovation, but also, of course, of other policies. And as I say, we are not starting from scratch because we have started from the research perspective. We have already developed a lot of, thanks to projects such as Super G, but also in other areas, so many other Horizon 2020 projects have yielded a huge amount of knowledge and innovations that are already a good input into this, all the activities that need to be geared towards achieving this target. So we are not starting from scratch, but it doesn't mean that we don't need to step up our efforts with more resources and more common understanding from all stakeholders. And in this sense, when we come now to the Horizon Europe, as you may know, it covers from 2021 to 2027. I show in this picture, in this slide, the overall structure. I'm not going to explain the whole structure, but you can see the different pillars. And maybe the most relevant for us today here is the pillar 2, where we have the different clusters under which we have the work programs, but also the different partnerships and missions. I will explain this a little bit later. And the most relevant, perhaps for us today, is the one on food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and the environment, where we will have around 9 billion euro attached, which is really an impressive increase of funding attached to this priority compared to the amount of funding that we had for the same areas under Horizon 2020. So this shows that it's conceived and is perceived as a key area where really resources have to be devoted and more efforts need to be made. So this is very important. I wanted to show this just to explain a little bit the whole process towards reaching the objectives and the structure of Cluster 6 under Horizon Europe, because I think it's good for you to see the whole landscape and where grasslands could fit there. In developing in preparing the work program, if you want, this is in the final outcome that we will hopefully see in a few days. You will be hopefully seen in a few days. There has been a whole process behind of consulting stakeholders, of a lot of co-creation between the Commission, with the member states, experts, And in all this process, there has been an identification of priority research and innovation needs. This has been also settled and explained, and you can have a look at this document because it was approved not so long ago. It was published. It's the Horizon Europe Strategic Plan from 2021-2022 that recognizes a series of key strategic orientations, and one of them is the one that you can see more highlighted in light green in the slide, is restoring Europe's ecosystems and biodiversity and managing sustainably natural resources to ensure food security and a clean and healthy environment. This is, I think, the one where work on grasslands could fit better, of course. This is just to quickly show the how we come from the strategic plan to the work program. So the strategic plan identifies a series of impacts where we really want to get with our activities under cluster 6. You have them on the left side. You clearly see that I think all of them, practically all of them are or can be relevant for grasslands. Number 1 is climate neutrality and adaptation to climate change. The number 2 is preservation and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. Number 3 is key, is also sustainable and circular management of natural resources, tackling pollution, the bioeconomy. Number 4 is about food and nutrition security for all, from farm to fork, really. Then a very important one, recognizing the importance of development of rural, coastal, and urban areas. And last but not least, governance models enabling sustainability, environmental observation. So these are the overall impacts where we want to get with the cluster 6, and it has been translated into destinations that you can see to the right side of the slide. Destination 1 on biodiversity, destination 2 on food systems, destination 3 on circular economy, and so on. This is just to give you a snapshot of what's to be expected in the work program when it's published. What I wanted to say here is about I was mentioning a little bit earlier already some of the instruments that we will have to implement our aims, our ambition under Horizon Europe, in particular for cluster 6. So we will have on one side, as I said earlier, the calls for collaborative projects such as Super G. So these are transnational projects that are going to tackle specific challenges specified in the different calls. As I said, unfortunately, it's not possible for me to give you a lot of details about this yet because it's not officially published, but you will be hopefully able to have a look soon at the opportunities. In terms of the other instruments, they will be so-called, well, new, not totally new, because partnerships under Horizon Europe are already existing. What is new under Horizon Europe is perhaps a new approach to partnerships, which are concerted research and innovation efforts with the EU and associated countries and all private sector foundations or stakeholders to achieve really ambitious objectives. So it's compared to the partnership that we have now under Horizon 2020. These are aimed to be bigger in scope, also in the amount of funding that perhaps they will have, of course, and then also avoid a little bit the repetition or some overlaps that perhaps we may have seen under Horizon 2020. We will also have missions. These are totally new instruments, are going to be a set of concerted actions among all stakeholders to reach an ambitious goal. In this case, the ambitious goal is really to achieve, to improve the soil health in Europe, and it has a very clear target of at least 25% of all soils in the EU, in each EU member state, healthy. Well, the mission is, this proposed mission on soil health and food is, as I say, it's a proposal. It has not been fully endorsed yet, but if it is, when it is going to be definitely an important tool, I think, for promoting and for really understanding better the role of grasslands in achieving this objective of soil health, I think. So it's an important thing for you to have a look at. And when it comes to the partnerships, there are under cluster 6 of Horizon Europe, as I explained earlier, there will be, there are 8 candidate partnerships. Some of them are going to start quite soon, I think this year, or perhaps next year, notably the one on biodiversity that perhaps is one that can interest you most. And on the side of the partnerships that are going to come a bit later in Horizon Europe, there is one on agroecology in living labs and research infrastructures that is currently under preparation, and it's hopefully to be published already in the work program in 23-24. So that's to start already at least in 23-24. So it's very much under preparation. And on this one, I wanted to just to give you a little bit of a hint of what we are planning there, because again, in this case, I think it can provide opportunities for research, specifically focusing on grasslands. Coming back a little bit to the work program, I cannot again enter into the details, but I can tell you that grasslands, when we look at the work programs in 2022, are going to be quite prominent there, because you will see that there are opportunities in various destinations under the work program. Destination 1 on biodiversity, destination 2 on food systems, destination 4 on zero pollution, 5 on land, oceans, and water for climate action, and last but not least on destination 7 on environmental observation and digital solutions. So I invite you to have a look at that when it's possible, to see the concrete opportunities. Now for the partnership, I just very briefly wanted to explain, well, this is a bit the slide that we used when we want to explain the rationale for proposing a partnership with the member states on agroecology. Why agroecology? I think there has been, including in the strategies in the Green Deal that I mentioned already at the beginning, there is quite a lot of recognition of the potential role that agroecology can have in reaching all these objectives in relation to climate and more sustainable food systems in general. Not only from the European Union level, but also at the international level. You may be aware that there has been some work done by international organizations such as the FAO, defining some elements for agroecology. There have been later after that some other debates recognizing the potential. So it's really something that we believe has possibilities to really contribute to what we want to achieve. And even in the context of the CAP, you may be aware that not so many months ago, the Commission published a possible list of eco schemes that could receive support under the first pillar of the CAP. And already there, also agroecology was considered as one of the possible practices, and including also permanent grasslands there. So it's a little bit to give you the perspective of where we come from with this partnership on agroecology. In terms of the partnership itself, the objectives, the activities is very much under construction. As I said earlier, we are really having a co-creation process with the member states and with associated countries, with stakeholders, in order to define all these things, or the goals, the objectives, the activities. But to start with, the idea really that we have in mind is to have a partnership that is really helping to accelerate the transition towards sustainable climate and ecosystem-friendly farming practices. And the objectives, again, under construction and very preliminary, is really to strengthen the agroecology research and innovation ecosystem that we think can still be much improved, and in order to be able to really contribute to this, to what we want to achieve. Also to improve farmers' knowledge on the implementation of agroecology and its benefits, and also improve the sharing of knowledge and experience across regions and countries on agroecological practices. In terms of the activities, again, this is very preliminary because we still have to define those according to the objectives once they are really set and agreed by all the people involved. But we were thinking, or we were aiming at setting up a common framework for methods, protocols, data management. That is, I think, particularly important in the case of agroecology, because it's a very site-specific practice that really depends on what's happening on a specific farm or at landscape level, and we need to have these methodologies and these tools adapted to be able to follow that process and this evolution. Also to create spaces for long-term site-specific and real-life experimentation. So these are the so-called living labs, or alike, that we have in the title of the partnership, the tentative, I should say, partnership title. So these are really settings where we think we could have the possibility to create, co-create tailor-made solutions to local challenges. As I said, agroecology is very much local specific. So this would be these settings where we could have these exchanges with the different stakeholders to achieve this, and then create a network of these spaces. So really the aim is to have a network of these living labs or these settings at European level. I'm not going to enter into the details of this very complicated slide. It's just to show you in a snapshot the process that we are following in order to to build what we have to. There's a partnership proposal at the beginning that we have to prepare by the end of the year. And we are doing it notably with the SCAR, which is the Standing Committee on Agricultural Research. It's a committee of the Commission that involves member states and associated countries. So far, we have 24 countries involved in this discussion, with Denmark, Germany, and Spain acting as co-chairs. So this is the working group that is really centralizing the discussions to get to a common understanding on the vision, the ambitions, the objectives, the activities, the funding schemes. So all these things are being discussed in this working group, I should say, with involvement of a lot of stakeholders. So it's not only a discussion involving the Commission and the member states, but also stakeholders, farmers' organizations, other Horizon 2020 projects. So this can also be an opportunity for Super G, notably because, as you may know, for these partnerships, we will also need to develop a strategic research and innovation agenda, which is basically the document that is going to set what are going to be the research activities undertaken under the partnership. And that is where we will need to spell out the different areas. There is where I could see a possibility for having a discussion on the role that grasslands could have in this RIA. So I think this is all I wanted to say for this slide. And actually, the end of my presentation, I have a little bit of links here where you can have a look at the things that I mentioned. The link to the Horizon Europe website, where hopefully you will be able to see soon the work program, and also the link to the partnership, to the SCAR Agroecology, and to the mission on soils. So I hope I was not too long and that was clear enough. So if you have any questions later on, I will be happy to reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna, for that very comprehensive overview of the great ambition of Horizon Europe and the research priorities going forward. As Susanna said, yeah, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A section using the Q&A button, and we'll answer as many as we can later on. So if Susanna can unshare, then René can there share his screen for the next presentation. So just to introduce René Schils is a senior scientist and consultant at Wageningen University and Research. He's an author of peer-reviewed papers on nutrient cycling in agricultural systems, legumes, grassland management, fertilizer and manure use, nitrogen and phosphorus efficiency, and greenhouse gas emissions. René has a special interest in grass-based dairy systems, and in Super G, he is task leader on the assessment of ecosystem services of permanent grasslands. So René, the floor is yours.
Okay. You can see my screen, I suppose. Yeah. Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. So I'll be talking in the next 15 minutes or so on ecosystem service delivery from European permanent grasslands. And I'll be using the same definition as Paul used in his introduction to the webinar. So grasslands that have not been in a crop rotation for at least 5 years. That's the definition we use for permanent grasslands. I will start with a quick overview of where we find permanent grasslands and why they are so important. Then the main bulk of this presentation will be about the literature review we carried out in the framework of Super G on the provision of ecosystem services. And I will finish with some thoughts on what the future role of permanent grasslands could be in the European food system. So if you move on to this map of Europe, so there you see all different shades of green, and it gives the share of permanent grasslands in the specific country, the share of the utilized agricultural area. And you can see quite a large variation across Europe, of course, and on average across Europe it's around 34%. And what you see areas like in the British Isles, but also in the Alpine regions with much higher proportions of permanent grassland. but there are also some specific countries like Denmark, but also some countries in Eastern Europe which have quite low proportions of permanent grasslands. But perhaps more important than this spatial variation is the temporal trend, and which is a decreasing trend. And that's because since, let's say, after the Second World War, since the 1950s, of course, we've been focusing very much on self-sufficiency of food production. And thereby, lots of permanent grasslands were converted into temporary grasslands or were converted into cropland. And on the other end of the scale, in contrast, there were also, let's say, mountainous regions or very wet lowland regions where permanent grasslands were disappeared because of abandonment or for afforestation. And although we do not have really, for this whole long period, we have exact figures on these decreasing trends, we know of areas in Europe where the decrease has been at least 30 to 50% over the past 50 years. And it's also important to know that this, or to realize that these threats are still continuing, are still present until today. So why is that important? Why do, when permanent grasslands disappear? Of course, you all know that permanent grasslands deliver well, cheap grass, which is an excellent feed for dairy cows, for beef cattle, for sheep, for all kinds of for ruminants. But permanent grasslands are, of course, more than only delivering feed, and they are important for many other ecosystem services, for instance, for pollination services, carbon sequestration. We've seen that in the previous presentation, a lot of emphasis on carbon sequestration, but also for as a nice landscape, for recreational value, and for protection against erosion and flooding, for instance. But let's say the presence of permanent grassland in itself is, of course, not a guarantee that all these different ecosystems are delivered. And it's also very important on how we are managing these grasslands for the delivery of these ecosystem services. So that's why in our review, we concentrated on reported effects in the literature on land use and on management. And so the objective of our review was to assess all these reported effects across the broad scientific domain. And what we did is that we searched for papers which had comparisons between either permanent grassland and cropland, or permanent grassland and temporary grassland, or permanent grassland and forest, so that we could compare the ecosystem services delivered by these different land uses. And we had a set of 5 what we call management contrasts, where we've looked at experiments with nitrogen inputs, grassland renewal, or number of species, for instance. And we assessed the effects on these 6 different ecosystem services, including biodiversity. So in the initial step, when we looked for all those papers, we harvested more or less something like 70,000 papers dealing with these grassland and ecosystem services. And in the step-by-step selection, well, we had very strict criteria to look for these contrasts and to look for the right indicators of these ecosystem services. We ended up with approximately 700 papers which we read and which we analyzed on ecosystem services. And here you see the same map again that I showed earlier. And now it also includes these red dots, and the bigger the dot is, the higher the number of papers we found in this certain region. And of course, you can see, well, on the whole, you see, let's say that most papers were found in a broad range, going from the British Isles to Eastern Europe, so in the middle of Europe. A lot of papers, of course, were found in regions where the proportion of permanent grasslands was higher than 40%. But we also found a lot of papers in regions which have lower proportions of permanent grasslands. And it's also good to mention that approximately 2/3 of the papers that we analyzed were found in the Atlantic and continental regions of climate regions of Europe. So how did we go about in the review? So here on the left-hand side, again, you see the contrasts, so the 3 land use contrasts and the 5 management contrasts. And in the bar on the top, you can see the 6 ecosystem services. And for each ecosystem service, we have selected some relevant indicators. So for animal feed, we looked at dry matter yield, we looked at energy content, protein content, and for climate regulation, we looked at nitrous oxide emissions, carbon sequestration, of course. So then we had a very broad range of indicators. And then we started reading these papers, and what we did was that we looked at the contrast, and then in this case we had 9 cases in which permanent grassland was compared to cropland, and where there was an outcome where they studied pollinators, so the abundance of pollinators. And in this particular case, you see that we had 3 studies in which permanent grassland was favorable for pollinators, 3 were unfavorable, and another 3 were neutral for pollinators. So all we needed to do then was read all those papers, and in a painstakingly effort, we filled this complete matrix. And of course, I'm not going into detail here, but just a couple of quick things which is interesting to mention. And that's first of all, of course, the different number of papers you see in the animal feed domain, which is by far the largest number of papers if you compare it to the other ecosystem services. And also within the animal feed domain, you see quite a lot of differences. So a lot of research efforts, or research funding, you could say, went into effects of nitrogen inputs, into effects of defoliation frequency, or effects of grassland renewal, for instance. Whereas other areas, we found much lower number of papers, and especially if you look at the whole matrix, some areas have got a very low number of papers, or even no papers at all, which we could use. So like I said, I'm not going into all the details, but I selected 2 of these contrasts to look at further. So first of all, the comparison between permanent grassland and cropland, and the comparison, or let's say the effect of nitrogen input. So before I show you the results, I first have to tell you a bit about how we transformed the outcome into a scale with which we could work with. So we had to transform it into one figure. So all the favorable scores received a value of +1, the unfavorable of -1, and the neutral ones got a value of 0. So then you get, if for instance all papers scored unfavorable, so -1, then you get completely a -1 score, which you see on the left. On the other hand, you can get a +1 score if all papers were scored favorable for permanent grassland in this case. And of course, you've got all combinations in between, in which you can express as a figure between -1 and +1. Just a moment. So here again, if you then first look at the comparison of permanent grassland compared to cropland, you see that, again, you see the number of studies. There's also within this contrast, you see quite a different number of papers or cases we found. So ranging from only 1 study on plant ridges up to 35 cases for carbon sequestration. And to the left side, so that's the green bar at the top, means that the outcome is favorable for permanent grassland, whereas going to the right, it is favorable for cropland. So on the whole, you see that permanent grassland scores from neutral to favorable for most of the indicators. Only for yield and energy, you clearly see that cropland scored better than permanent grassland. If you then move on to nitrogen input, and here we also see a very clear trade-off again between the animal feed domain, so that's below right, you see favorable effects of high nitrogen inputs for yield, for protein, and well, to a lesser extent for energy content. But if you then look at the other ecosystem services, you see that they are it's much more favorable with a low input, especially the biodiversity ones, nitrous oxide, nitrogen losses to water. So you can clearly see the trade-off between, let's say, the feed domain and the other ecosystem services. So from this review, we conclude that preventing the conversion of permanent grassland to cropland or temporary grassland secures the provision of multiple ecosystem services. Also, we've seen that intensification, and that doesn't only mean the nitrogen input that I showed, but it also goes for the grassland renewal, for instance, or other intensification measurements. Intensification of existing permanent grassland threatens the multifunctionality. And as I also already stated, prioritizing non-feed ecosystem services comes at a cost for the provision of animal feed and also quality of animal feed. So we believe that these conclusions justify that certain actions should be taken. So first of all, the protection of permanent grasslands, or of the current area of permanent grasslands, to prevent further losses of permanent grasslands. And also, we consider the time ripe now to increase support for low intensity management on existing permanent grasslands. I think it's interesting just to look a bit further than our own study, and in this context. So I show you here 3 recent scenario studies on design of future food systems in Europe, or in the country in Europe. So from the left, that's the 10 years for agroecology approach from Pau in France. In the middle is the eco-left approach, which was applied in Sweden. And on the right, from the Netherlands, an approach for circular agricultural systems from Van Zanten from 2019. And what do these, I'm not going into detail here, but all these studies, all these scenarios, they treat, or they have a special place, of course, for grasslands and also for permanent grasslands especially. And what we learned from these studies is that, first of all, they really prioritize cropland for food production, so no feed production on croplands. Grasslands should and byproducts should be really used by ruminant livestock. That's their view. And this is best, these grasslands are best combined or best used as low input grasslands, where we can benefit the most also from other ecosystem services. So given the outcome of our review and some of the concepts I've just shown, I think anyway, multifunctional permanent grasslands will become increasingly important in the European food system. That's quite clear to me. And well, to be able to do that, I think we need to protect permanent grasslands for further declines and really reduce the intensity of permanent grasslands. And also on behalf of all the other authors, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, René. Very interesting talk. So thanks for that sort of very succinct, actually, summary of a very quite complex and involved study. So yeah, I'd just like to remind participants about the Q&A button. I'm sure the first two talks will have stimulated a lot of thought, curiosity, quite a few questions. So please put any questions you've got, any thoughts you've got into the Q&A via the Q&A button. And we'll try and deal with as many questions as we can in the time remaining after the final talk, which is from Yiying. So Yiying, if you could share your screen, I will introduce you. So Yiying is a senior agricultural economist and evaluator at ADAS in the UK. She has a robust knowledge of sustainable development policy, economic theory, and evaluation methods, and extensive experience in farmer surveys, behavioural research, and evaluation of public policy, including assessments of policy effectiveness, efficiency, impact, and value for money. So Yiying, if you'd like to start your presentation, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for the introduction. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be talking about some early research finding from our farmer survey regarding their attitudes and behaviors of grassland management. So these are some early findings and mainly based on the data from the UK. So just a very quick review of the objectives of the survey. So it was to understand the current permanent grassland management practices across 5 case study countries. And it was to identify opportunities and risks for ecosystem service provision. And lastly, it was to gain an understanding of drivers and behaviors for farmers to making changes in their permanent grasslands management. So our sample was selected from 5 case study countries. They are the UK, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, and Czech Republic. In each country, we interviewed 75 farmers in grassland areas. So in total, we have 375 responses. So the survey was trying to get an equal sample between 3 groups of farms, and they are organic, non-organic, high input farms, and non-organic, low input farms. We're trying to get an equal split, not necessarily within each of the country, but for the overall sample, we're trying to get a balanced representation from the 3 groups. And the survey was also to cover 4 main livestock types. They are beef cattle, milking cows, sheep, goats, and mixed farming. Our survey respondents are all primary decision makers of their farming business, and they all have 5 years. They all have at least 5 years of experience in farming. So the survey questions were based on a theoretical framework in behavioral science. It was an integrated model combining the theory of planned behavior and protection motivation theory. It's looking at the relationship between attitudes, subjective norms, intention, and behavior. So in this context, we have been looking at attitudes of farmers towards farming and the environment generally, and also towards permanent grassland, the value of permanent grassland management, their intention and adoption behavior of sustainable grassland management options, particularly in the context of their coping responses to pressures on natural resources. So this is our framework to structure the survey questions. So I'll be talking about some preliminary results from the survey. So we haven't got time to look at all the 375 responses yet. We only look at we have only looked at this subsample all the responses from the UK. We have 71 valid responses covering organic, intensive and extensive farms. So we did a largely quantitative analysis of the responses, looking at frequencies, percentages and averages, but we haven't done any tabulation analysis. Well, because the sample size is relatively small, it's only 71, but for the larger survey sample, the whole 375 responses will be doing that. So firstly, we looked at farmers' attitudes towards farming and asked them whether they, to what extent they agree with a set of statements around farming, the environment, their attitudes, and their attitudes of technology adoption, so on and so forth. We ranked these statements in order of their agreement level. So we can see the top 5 statements on this chart suggest that the farmer respondents are largely pro-environment, they're open-minded, they enjoy farming, and they're taking good care of the countryside. So that's very positive attitudes is towards the farming environment. We also asked about their perceptions of permanent grasslands and their role in relation to delivering ecosystem services. We can see from this chart across the board, there is high level agreement in all the statements, is saying that farmers are recognizing the value of permanent grassland in the delivery of ecosystem services. Again, that's very positive. And we also asked about their current and future uptake of different management options. So we rank these options based on their stated current uptake level. So on the top, we have the mostly adopted options. At the bottom, we have the least adopted options. So in the left-hand side corner, we can see these options have higher uptake currently. So they're mainly soil testing, more detailed soil testing, applying lime, and also forage testing. They're relatively straightforward, but they have very high uptake, but relatively low potential for future uptake. So in the middle, we have a set of management options that have greater potential for future uptake. And looking at these options, they are things like grazing plan, and varying the timing of cutting and grazing, overseeding with and different grass. So they're basically involving some planning and timing. So hopefully with some advice and guidance from technical experts, farmers can achieve more in their grassland management. So these groups of options represent like higher potential for future uptake. From an extension and technology extension point of view, we should be focusing on these groups options. Looking at the bottom, looking at the few options at the bottom of the chart. So they are the options with very low uptake at the moment, but also very low potential for future uptake. So over 50% of the farmers said they are unlikely or very unlikely to take up these management practices or management options. So these are often involving technology and some investment. So like the GPS, remote sensing technology and virtual fencing. So if we want to promote technology to be used in permanent grassland management, we should put more effort in so that farmers can overcome the barriers, because at the moment it's very low uptake and very few appetite to take up in the future. So these we should be providing more support, whether it's knowledge, advice, or capital grants for things like a suite of support in order to promote it further. So we also looked at a range of influencing factors in farmers' behaviour in terms of maintaining permanent grassland. So, this slide is particularly on the income structure. We can see the farmers are highly reliant on farming income, as well as direct payment subsidies and agri-environment payments. So we should be linking support with these influencing factors through direct payments, agri-environment schemes. In terms of factors that are influencing the implementation of changes in farmers' management practices, we look at a range of things, but most importantly, farmers relied on their own knowledge and understanding to make decisions. Also, they will look for something compatible with their farm systems and practicality of farming. And economic factors and agronomic factors are also very important in their decision-making process in deciding whether or not to implement changes. Looking at different mechanisms of influencing farmers, this slide is suggesting that farmers are most influenced by policy and regulation. Another set of important factors are market and economy. Voluntary schemes have like less influencing power, and technology was ranked the least in terms of influencing farmers' behavior in maintaining permanent grassland. So we also asked farmers about their need for support for investing in new technology. So across all these support, they have like a relatively high level of need for almost all of them, apart from peer support. They want some evidence of effectiveness of the technology to convince themselves to adopt, and also they need support in accessing to capital, and they would also like further knowledge and just to and also access to appropriate scale and or system for the technologies to work. So these are the range of support they will need. Just in conclusion, our survey, our initial survey results suggest farmers are having positive attitudes towards the environment and the farming. They're recognizing the role of permanent grassland in delivering ecosystem services, and they when they make decisions about which management options to take, they use their own knowledge and experience. They're looking for something that are compatible with their farming system, and also the profitability of their business, and a range of agronomic factors. So they're mostly driven by policy and regulation, followed by market and economy. So voluntary schemes and technologies have the influence to a lesser extent compared to the other two. So in terms of their uptake of management options, some straightforward management options have very high uptake, but options that involve technology have a very low uptake at the moment, and also low potential future uptake. If we were to promote these options, we should put more efforts in. So in order to help farmer with future uptake, we need to be focusing on demonstrating the effectiveness of new technologies and help farmer to access the capital and provide them with knowledge and advice and training. So that's the key findings so far. For our next step,
1 more minute, Ying.
Okay, so we'll do like more comprehensive analysis of the whole sample and cross-tabulation analysis, testing the relationship between different variables and the building an econometric model to understand farmers' attitudes, intention and behavior, giving their current constraints, both economically and environmentally, from pressure for just coping to the pressure for the natural resources. So that's all from me. Yeah, thanks all for listening.
Thanks, Yiying. Very interesting outcomes already from just a part of that survey from the UK. And obviously we'll have a lot more information when we get the information in from the 4 other countries involved. We've got a few questions on the Q&A, but please keep putting them in, and we'll try and get a few of them before we close in 10-15 minutes time. But before we get to the questions, we've got a couple of polls just to make things a little bit interesting, which I think Francesca is going to put up for us. Have you got the first question there? Here we go. Yeah, so first question, which relates most closely to René's presentation. Yeah, the question is, what do we need to understand most urgently? So, is it how permanent grasslands should be managed to maximize greenhouse gas mitigation, or nutrient efficiency, or biodiversity, or aesthetics and recreation, or feed production and quality, or multifunctionality? So which of these is the highest priority in terms of understanding how permanent grasslands should be managed? So if you click one of those, and we'll see what comes out in your responses.
Thank you, Paul. Let's just wait a few moments while everyone is voting.
Wait a few seconds while we get our heads around the question.
Yeah, exactly. We already have
pick a response.
% of people voting. Let's see if someone else wants to vote. Let's see. Okay, I think no one else will vote, so I will share with you the results.
Okay, interesting. So René's message has clearly sort of hit home, in that 59% of people have sort of prioritized multifunctionalities that need to understand how permanent grasslands should be managed to deliver this sort of multifunctionality function. So that's great. So should we move on to the next one, which I think is more sort of policy based, in terms of how farmers should be supported? So this one, yep, more linked to policy. So how do we think how to best support European grassland farmers in managing grassland sustainably? How should they be supported? Should it be through basic payment plus public money for public goods? So in terms of CAP, I suppose that's pillar 1 and pillar 2. Or should it be public money for public goods only, so only paid through agri-environment schemes, but no sort of basic payment? Do you think there should be no direct financial support, and you allow them to work out a sort of sustainable economic system without support? Or would you think something else is a better option, or none of the above would be the way to go? So if you would like to vote, and remember we're thinking about grassland farmers in particular. Again, we'll just leave a few seconds for people to get their votes in. Are they coming in, Francesca?
Yes, they are. We have 77% of people voting. Let's see if someone else wants to vote. Just a few more seconds. Okay, 80%. Anyone else would like to vote? Feel free to join us. Okay, I think no one else wants to vote, so I'll share the results with you.
Okay. So interestingly, yeah, so for grassland farmers, the majority, over half, think that European grasslands, in terms of supporting them to manage grasslands sustainably, should get basic payment plus public money for public goods. So that's interesting. Only 3% saying no direct financial support, but 8% have got other ideas. So That's an interesting response. So thanks very much for that, for the participation. Not a massive sample, but just a bit of fun to get people thinking about these sorts of things. So yeah, if we move on just with a few questions, there's a few questions coming on the Q&A. So I will start with the top one. Now this is from LIC Consultants. They've asked, there's a lot of ambition from programs such as Horizon Europe and managing grasslands more sustainably. But how is the required knowledge going to be passed to farmers to ensure they are successful with the management of grasslands? I don't know, Susanna, would you like to have a go at that within the context of Horizon Europe?
Yeah, Paul, thank you. And also thank you for the question, because I think it's actually, it's a bit, resonates a bit with one of my thinkings when I was replying to the second Paul question about which measures and what do farmers need in order to manage grassland sustainably. I was thinking, indeed, payments are important, but not only, I think it's not sufficient. I think indeed these things like passing the knowledge to farmers, or making sure that farmers have the knowledge, or facilitating the sharing of knowledge between farmers or between farmers and other stakeholders, it's also important. And in terms of how to do that, of course, there are already mechanisms and instruments to do that. If we are talking not only about research, but under the CAP, there are already tools that facilitate that. We have, for instance, the European Innovation Partnership on Agricultural Productivity and Sustainability, which is really being quite a successful tool to bring the, so to say, the research results closer to farmers, because it's an instrument that is really bridging the CAP with the research and innovation policy. So in this regard, I think it's quite interesting. And I think in the future, the EIP is going to continue to be a key tool for that. There will be, of course, the farm advisory services and other instruments that are going to ensure that farmers have, or that we make sure, that farmers have the knowledge that is produced by research. But also, of course, under Horizon Europe, as you know, we have an instrument. We already had it, of course, under Horizon 2020, as you know very well, the multi-actor approach, where we ensure that projects are involving the end users genuinely, really, from the beginning to the end of the project. That is also something quite important, I think, in order to make sure that we have really the end users, the ones who need the information, really involved. And if we see some of the initiatives I was presenting that we have in mind for the future, well, I think Horizon Europe in general has quite a lot of emphasis on the place-based aspects of things. So we are really talking here about, in general, we will talk about permanent grasslands, but in general about practically all practices that we can discuss. All of them have a quite strong focus on specificity on the local aspect. So I think this is something that is going to emanate quite strongly from Horizon Europe, and this is going to be seen also in the actions, and in particular in the partnership that I mentioned to you on living labs. This is precisely the idea behind. It's really to have to facilitate, to shorten, let's say, the time lapse goes from research results to passing the research results to farmers. We think that living labs could be a useful tool to bring all the actors together in identifying the problems, identifying the needs, co-creating the solutions together, testing, experimenting together, and finding the solutions for the problems in a specific context. So I think from the side of research, it's a bit of mixed research and innovation. Of course, there are also other disciplines involved here, social innovation, behavioral sciences, etc. It's a little bit an innovation that we are introducing with Horizon Europe at a more larger scale. So I think there are different instruments basically to answer this question, which is, I think, very relevant. I agree.
Thanks, Susanna. Yeah, it's always a big challenge trying to get that sort of dissemination down to on communication with farmers and the farmer networks. But yeah, very important part of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe going forward. I see we're tight for time, but we'll try and get through a couple more questions, one for René, one for Yiying before we leave. And then what we'll do is try and put a Q&A together and send that round to all participants. But if I just pick one out for René, this is from Andrea Furlan. You talked about trends in the last 50 years with a decline in permanent grassland, but we know that in the latest years, the PG areas are rather stable. Can you provide more insights on a shorter time span? For René. You're muted.
I don't want to interfere with you, but I already answered that question in the chat.
Yeah, I don't think the participants can see the
Okay,
your
sorry.
answer, René. Yeah.
Okay, so no. So there's you're right that let's say that there's some kind of stabilization of the decrease in permanent grassland areas over the past let's say 10 years or so, if you look at the shorter time frame. But what I really need or also try to stress is that these threats are still there. So we did within Super G, we also did a survey among experts across Europe to make an inventarization of what threats are available are there for permanent grasslands, and then across different permanent grassland types. And so there was still the conclusion was that many of these permanent grassland types are still considered to be under threat, mainly from abandonment, but also from conversion to other land uses. So there's, I can understand you don't see that directly yet in the statistics, but the threat is still around there if there was not, let's say, some kind of balancing act, some policies on this. Then the second point of the question was, do you want to go on with this, Paul? Or there was on the literature review, was it on a meta-analysis of individual papers? So we worked on individual papers, so we did a qualitative analysis, so we just compared whether something was higher or lower, or whether there was not a difference. And are these available? No, the results are not available yet. So there's a paper out which is submitted, which is under review now, and we hope that it's published later this year, of course. Yeah.
Great, thanks, René. And so, yeah, question for Yiying. This is from, if I can find the question again. Yeah, so from Martina Spurry. She says, thank you for this great overview on the interview results from the UK. Martina did the interviews in Switzerland, where regular soil testing is actually mandatory. What's the situation in the UK?
Yeah, I did try to answer through that Q&A chat box. Yeah, it is required since the introduction of the new rules farming for water since 2018. So as part of farmers' fertilizer planning.
Yes, I think now in certainly in England, with the farming rules for water, then they have to do soil testing every 5 years as part of the nutrient planning, don't they? So yeah, it's becoming more of a requirement. Great. Okay, I'm sorry we haven't got time to deal with any of the other questions on the webinar, but what we'll do is we'll get some questions written out and we'll send out a sort of a Q&A paper that everyone can have a look at. So yeah, just to thank everybody for joining today. Thanks to all the speakers for their presentations and for all the questions that were put into the Q&A box. I'd like to thank CONSULAI for organising the event, so Francisca, Dina and Carolina. And as I say, we'll send out a full list of questions and answers to all participants once we put those together. So hopefully look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the next Super G webinar, which is in a week's time on the 22nd of June. That one's on drivers of change with another 3 speakers and a Q&A session. So thanks for joining. Have a very good rest of your afternoon and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.